while your day is winding down. They're just getting started. This is South Coast Tonight with Chris McCarthy and Marcus Farrow. They've got you covered on all the news of the day, from local issues to politics on both sides of the aisle. This is the place where the movers and shakers come to be heard, to listen, and where they're held accountable. This is South Coast Tonight on WBSM.
Good evening. Welcome to South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus Farrow. 508-996-0500 is how you can join me this evening. We've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot that happened last night that we were covering here on South Coast Tonight. We had Adam Bass reporting live, giving us live updates of what was going on in the council chambers. He was there. So with all of the protests and the tensions in the chambers and the things that were said on the record, I wanted to invite Adam back to talk about it because they ran out of time. We ran out of time on the air here before he could come on. So Adam's going to be joining us at 8. I'm looking forward to that. But first, we're joined by State Rep from New Bedford, Chris Hendricks, who's been doing a lot of work on the budget up at Beacon Hill. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Marcus, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. So you, for the last few weeks, have been up at the State House. It is the time where, you guys are hammering out the budget. What's that process like?
So the budget is a very involved process, as you know. We just finished up on Monday. We started on Monday and we finished this past Wednesday. And basically what it is, it's, each legislator has to file a handful, typically on average, a handful of amendments for local earmarks to get local monies. And then essentially the debate process just involves you trying to get that money and making your case to Ways and Means and trying to bring that money home.
So you represent New Bedford now. It's a new district. It's the New Bedford now has 2 state reps, you and Miss Tony Cabral. Tony Cabral's always been all New Bedford, but you are now representing an all New Bedford district. What are some of the budget priorities that you had going into this session?
Well, the top budget priority that I put through, and I put through every year since every budget that I've been the state rep, I've made this my top priority. And that's with the Greater New Bedford Opioid Task Force.
Okay.
I was able to secure $75,000 for that program. As you know, that's substance abuse, opioid addiction is a top priority, legislative priority of mine. And I was very, very happy to get that money. Typically, I've only gotten 50 in the past, so this is an increase in that earmark.
That's great.
It's a program that's run through the New Bedford Police. It's a program that I'm actively involved in on an advocacy level. I'm part of the recovery subcommittee, as you may know.
Yes.
So I was really happy that we were able to get that increased. We also had I was able to get 2 other local earmarks, one of which was $50,000 for the Girls Design Academy up in the North End. And what that does, that's an earmark that my predecessor, Bob Kazera, and his aide, Kate, were able to work on prior to me getting there, that I've made a priority to keep going. And the Girls Design Academy is an after-school program that services 3rd grade to 5th grade school children, all girls, in the city of New Bedford, with a focus on STEAM education, which is science, technology, engineering, arts. Usually you hear STEM.
Yes.
This includes arts as well, and mathematics. And that's an area that's underserved in that population, typically. So I'm really proud to get that funded with $50,000. And I got another $80,000 for the America Reads program, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. That was a federal program started by Bill Clinton in the 90s to improve childhood literacy. And what that money is going to be used for is for transportation for UMass students to go and tutor New Bedford children in other areas as well, but mostly New Bedford kids, public school kids, on reading and to build up literacy rates for our schools.
Yeah, because there's certainly a gap in New Bedford schools and probably other school districts in the South Coast with respect to, reading level.
Yeah, I mean, all the help we can get in that department, the better.
Yeah.
Obviously, we made some investments, some big investments over the years with the Student Opportunity Act. But, this kind of hands-on approach, with the student-to-student type interaction, I think is going to serve the New Bedford students well.
So, Chris, the opioid task force, you secured $75,000, which you said is an increase from what you normally secure. Just a little bit more about the work the opioid task force does and your involvement with it.
What they do is they essentially provide resources to folks direct resources to folks who either suffered a non-fatal overdose or to families who are essentially struggling with opioid addiction, mostly heroin addiction. They have pop-up events. They have avenues to get people into treatment, and essentially it's a program that that allows the New Bedford Police to treat this as a public health crisis, as opposed to jailing our way through it.
Right.
So it's basically a resource, community-based program that pulls resources from all over, and it's a greater New Bedford. So it includes Acushnet, it includes Fairhaven, includes folks from Dartmouth. So it's a good collaborative effort that kind of just pulls our community's resources to get people the help they need, especially when they have already have had a non-fatal overdose, Narcan training, public education, things like that.
And with the increased funding in that area, what are there any additional things you're looking to do for it, or just have bigger impacts with the things that you currently are doing with it?
Well, I know in the past they've used that for increased data collection. If you recall, when I first started getting this earmark, they used it for wastewater data. So to figure out what areas need the resources more to combat opioid addiction, based on the levels of opioids in the wastewater.
Okay.
So that's kind of an innovative thing that kind of sparked my interest in getting an earmark in the first place. So I would imagine any increase. One of the good things about this program is that it is the data collection.
Yeah.
Because it was Chief Cordero who once said, data tells a story. So the more data we have about an issue, whether it be opioids, education, or anything, the better we will be able to handle a solution for that issue.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. The wastewater, because they use that to test COVID as well, COVID levels.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. And the woman who was part of that technology, I've seen. She came into New Bedford. I think it's a husband and wife duo that own that company that does that. And they came into New Bedford. We had multiple discussions on it. Now you see them all over. When COVID hit, you see them all over the news, on international news, and so it's kind of interesting that we were able to get that type of technology here first.
We're speaking with Chris Hendricks, state rep from New Bedford. He had secured some big earmarks for the greater New Bedford area. So in combating the opioid crisis and some major educational earmarks as well. So, Chris, what's also in front of the it's a very big budget, but what's also in front of the State House is the tax relief plan. I know there was some plans for tax relief last session. Some of it got passed in the later sessions, but the 62F law kind of threw a wrench in the works. What are you looking at, particularly in this tax relief bill, that you think is going to be important?
Independent from the budget, what we did about 3 weeks ago now is that the House passed a very comprehensive tax relief bill in the House.
Yeah.
And we targeted, it's to improve the state's competitiveness, affordability, equity. By doing that, how we achieve that is providing rent tax relief to renters, seniors, low-income folks, and moderate-income residents. But at the same time, it's very much a compromise bill. The fact that we provide tax relief as well to the business community and high-income earners, because one of the main criticisms of the Fair Share Amendment is that it's going to drive high earners in the business community out of the state. which a lot of it was exaggerated, but at the same time, a lot of it was real. And so, as you saw in the governor's budget, she provided tax relief by way of the short-term capital gains and the estate tax. We did that a little differently, but in the same vein. And so what we did in that regard is right now short-term capital gains, which are short-term investments that yield profit. Our tax right now at 12%. So what the governor did is she bumped that down to 5%. We did the same thing, but we did that over 2 years.
Okay.
So this year it's going to be 8%. Next year is going to be 5%, as opposed to going right down to 5%. So we ease into it a little more than the governor's budget. And as far as the estate tax, what we did is we raised that from $1 million to $2 million. We took away the cliff effect. So right now, if you make more than $1 million, if you have more than $1 million in your estate, when you pass away, you pay a tax on all that first $1 million. Right now, what this bill did is we increased that to $2 million, and then we only tax what's above $2 million, not the whole estate.
Right, and that tax can get fairly high. My understanding of it, just from when I was doing some estates, I think it can get as high as 10, maybe 15%, something like that.
Yeah, and so in the idea that this is going to eat into the money that we're going to bring in through the fair share. We've estimated that we're going to probably bring in around $1 billion in the first year through the fair share amendment. Okay. So what that means is, this money, the tax breaks that we put in for the high income earners, it's going to cost the state money. So that's estimated. It's probably going to be around $250 to $350 million. So we're certainly still in the green as far as bringing in, money from higher income earners relative to the fair share amendment. But, at the end of the day, we still have to, make Massachusetts a place where people want to invest, people want to come and build industry. We don't want it to be, a place where people are leaving in droves. So I think this was a good compromise all around. And again, we what I'm really proud of in this bill is what we did for renters and seniors and low-income folks. Yeah.
So, and just for people, just a refresher on the fair share amendment, that is a 4% tax on yearly income over $1 million, right?
Correct.
So we're speaking with State Rep Chris Hendricks. He is a state rep from New Bedford. We're talking about the budget. So in the tax relief bill that was proposed by Governor Maura Healey, you guys have your own versions of that you're passing you're passing through. So in terms of process, has the tax relief bill passed the House already?
It has passed the House.
Okay.
It goes to the Senate. I don't really know. I haven't really got any indication what the Senate feels about it. Mm-hmm. But I would imagine what we have is hopefully is what it's going to look like in the end. And obviously the governor looks like it's not too far off from what the governor proposed in her budget. So we're anticipating that it shouldn't look too much different than what it is now. If I can just talk about what we do to renters.
Sure.
So the rental deduction right now is capped at $3,000 per year. We've increased that to $4,000. In addition to the tax breaks for renters, and if that's, by the way, that's going to affect about 880,000 people. Okay, and mostly low income folks. It's only going to cost about $40 million. So I'm really proud that we were able to get that in there, especially with what's going on with the rent debate and how prices are going to start going through the roof here, especially in New Bedford. But in the budget this past week, we also codified and made permanent protections for renters with relative to those who are in the court process, in the eviction process. Okay. So with the pandemic era protections we put in place, that if someone's in court and being evicted for non-payment of rent, we have to make sure that they fill out and apply for emergency assistance before a judgment can be put in place.
Right.
So what we did, so I think that's a huge thing because what it does is it requires the landlords to participate. Because a lot of those applications, a lot of those programs will require the landlord to be involved in helping, the tenant get that emergency fund, those emergency funds. So this codifies that and makes permanent that they have to, get those applications in. And if the only reason it's non-payment of rent, if it's for other reasons, then this doesn't play a role. But I think this, given the fact, especially I just with the non-binding ballot question that didn't go through, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm glad we're starting to get protections put in place already. We put $180 million in for the RAF program, another $173 in for the Massachusetts rental voucher program. So certainly this budget that we put in this past week takes into account that we're really in for the long haul when it comes to rental issues and housing stuff.
I normally wouldn't ask you to weigh in on municipal issues, but this is something that would go before the State House if it were to pass in New Bedford, a rent control or rent stabilization ordinance. I know that you've talked about it before. It didn't pass the city. It didn't pass the city council chambers. Mayor Mitchell's veto was successfully sustained, and that was more of a temperature check for the voters to see whether or not they would support it. What's your thoughts on it failing? And do you think rent stabilization or any type of rent restriction would be sound housing policy for New Bedford?
Well, I've always been of the opinion that it's a debate worth having, good, bad, or indifferent. As for the process that the city council chose to do with voting to put that on the ballot originally, I'd rather not speak to that. But
Sure.
But I will say that having that debate has certainly been out in the forefront, and I think that goal to achieve a robust public discourse about it was achieved. I think Councilor Burgo certainly deserves a lot of credit there for that. But anything as far as putting something in place would have to be, I think, talked about a little more on the market, how it would affect the market, how it would affect landlord, in them, raising rents, and obviously the percentage would be the debated point, 5%, 10%, 12%. I would, if anything were to be put in place, eventually it would have to be probably a lot higher than 5%. But certainly I think having that debate was a fruitful thing. It's going to be a topic that's only going to get more attention as the MBTA comes down here. So I think getting on the forefront and getting those topics discussed was certainly well intended and well achieved.
You sit on the housing committee in the State House, if I'm not mistaken. You talked about some of the achievements that you guys are securing for some of the relief that you guys are securing for renters, for people in that are lower income. Obviously makes up a big chunk of a population in your district in the city of New Bedford. What is some of the other work that the housing committee does that you're involved in?
Well, as you know, it's a legislative committee, so we don't. So as far as doing something tangible on an immediate basis, it's not really what that committee does. It's what we typically just review legislative bills that come through that have to do with housing, whether it be rent control, rent stabilization, tenant protections. I've talked, up and down the wall about tenant protections and how those things, like notice and being able to spread out upfront costs, things like that. So those types of bills is what we review and essentially hear debate on. Yeah. And then our tangible power is what we vote up or down those bills after we hear the testimony. So we have not heard any of those bills yet. We've had one hearing so far where we heard it was just one bill that was a special file by request. So it was kind of an outlier. But certainly coming into the spring and the summer, we'll be hearing more on the work that it's regards to the bills that we're reviewing.
We're speaking with State Rep Chris Hendricks of New Bedford. So you talked about tenant protections. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's an important conversation, especially with the whole process of evictions and notice and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I first of all, I want to make clear what we put in place and what is still in the bill process. So the non-payment of rent, when someone's in court for non-payment of rent, they have to fill out an application for emergency rental assistance before being, whether they're denied or approved, they have to fill out that application before a judgment is made. That is the law of the land. Well, that's what we passed in the House to eventually make the law of the state. So that's something that we're actually doing. The tenant protections you're referring to are still, bills in the State House that's been filed in order, for us to hopefully and someday vote on, which we haven't yet. And that's spreading out the upfront costs. So one of the main barriers for low-income folks when they're finding a new place is the upfront cost, first, last, and security deposit, which can be into several $1,000s.
Right.
So there's bills at the State House that would mandate that landlords allow a tenant to spread those upfront costs over the first 6 months of a tenancy in order to alleviate the pressure of of being able to find a place, being able to afford, the upfront cost to get in somewhere. And notice, if you're in a multi-housing unit and the owner of that building is in discussions or negotiations to sell that building, they have to provide, even if it's just preliminary discussions, they would have to, at a certain point on a statutory basis, give notice to all the tenants therein that they're even thinking about selling the property to another person in order to give them enough time to make arrangements, enough time to decide whether or not they want to stay. I think those are the stuff, the small things that we can do to combat the housing crisis. You also have legal counsel. So in the criminal world, if you can't afford a lawyer, the state provides one for you.
Yeah.
So there's a bill at the State House, which is one of the bills we will be reviewing, that would grant that same luxury to someone who's being evicted.
That's really important. That's really important, Chris. I mean, we went to law school together, right? So you're a practicing attorney. I am too. And, you have that Sixth Amendment right to counsel, but really the way it's been applied through Supreme Court jurisprudence and all that is really just exclusively for criminal cases. But where you're, the Gideon versus Wainwright. And I know there's been some talk at the federal level of expanding.
You're dropping case law now, huh?
Yeah. Professor Rucco would be proud. But what you're saying is you're looking at an expansion of that to include housing matters. So if someone can't afford a housing attorney, there would essentially be like a CPCS, a public counsel service.
Right. I mean, the argument is that something so critical and so vital as having a roof over your head would warrant having that same right to counsel,
of course,
as you would in a criminal case. And I could get along with that in theory. We do have something like that now called Lawyer for a Day.
Yes.
Where I think, we have a lawyer in a courthouse and housing courts all across the Commonwealth. But those, that's exactly what it sounds like, a lawyer for a day. And so that certainly is one of those
it's a volunteer
underfunded mechanisms of the law that don't get certainly enough attention and don't have the impact that we would like it to have.
Yeah, it's an important program. That's a lawyer of the day in housing court and in family and probate court is essentially a lawyer volunteering their time, right? For a day to advise people on stuff. But this would be you have a representative lawyer on the docket, right?
Right. And obviously that would cost money, CPCS costs money.
Yeah.
And something like this would certainly cost, but if we can alleviate the pressures for tenants and hopefully, we can also mitigate the amount of cases that go through the court process at the same time. So I haven't even begun to think about how much that would cost. And certainly that's something we'll hear further on as the session goes on, but certainly something we should think about.
Yeah, I'm certainly interested in that conversation as well. So we're speaking with State Rep Chris. Hendricks in New Bedford. They just did the budget session this week, and he secured some earmarks for the city of New Bedford. So Chris, we talked about the budget. We've talked about the budget priorities that you had. We talked about. Go ahead.
So there's some substantive stuff in the budget that I'd like to
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
so huge thing. So universal school meals. That's we passed that in the House. That's something that the federal government was helping out during the pandemic. That's something part of the large bucket with the Fair Share Amendment. You have education and transportation. The education piece, the majority chunk of that $500 $100,000. I think it's like $180,000 we use for universal meals in schools. So I think that's a huge thing. We talked about this before, reducing the stigma, making sure kids have the attention, the focus they need to learn. Essentially.
Yeah.
If they go to school hungry, that's the whole education piece goes out the window. So that's something we're really proud of. The universal school meals. We also allowed online lottery tickets and games for the Commonwealth to compete with the sports betting. That's a big change.
Online lottery tickets.
Yes.
So people can go online. So if I'm at 7-Eleven and someone the lottery is taking forever, that's going to be
on. At some point you will, if the Senate goes along with this and the governor, which she has indicated she is for, then yes, that will be put in place if it gets through.
Yeah, certainly a revenue driver for the Commonwealth. So,
right.
Go ahead.
And another big thing, Mark, is the no-cost prison phone calls we put through.
Finally,
if you recall, we put that through last year.
Yeah.
Through the House because of the veto process and a number of other things. The governor kind of nixed that whole thing, that whole effort.
Yeah.
So we revoted. We include all the jails, all the state jails and the county jails as well. The state prisons and county jails. So I think that's a really good way to reduce recidivism, making sure these folks who leave prison have the relationships and resources they need to succeed and not just get kicked out onto the street. So we're really proud of that we were able to put that through.
Yeah, so just for some background, just in case people might have forgot, there's a lot going on in that sheriff's election last year. But one of the things that happened was there was basically a lawsuit that said the state law says that the sheriff's offices can charge for phone calls. They did charge for phone calls, and so then there was after that, and Bristol County former Sheriff Tom Hodgson was the named party in that lawsuit, and the sheriff's offices throughout the Commonwealth were like, well, this is actually an important revenue driver for us. We need to. We need that to maintain, not only maintain phone calls, have the budget for the phone calls, but also for other things. But what you guys are purporting to do, which wasn't able to get done last time, you said Charlie Baker nixed it, was providing no-cost phone calls, which isn't actually a cost to the inmates, people got to remember. It's a cost to the people on the other side of the line.
Right.
So,
yeah, it only makes sense. There's tangible ways that we can affect and make that a reality.
Yeah.
And if you recall, the governor tied it into the dangerousness bill.
A
lot of legislative and procedural stuff that I won't get into, but it was a big point of contention with him and the Judiciary Committee, which I sit on, which is chaired by Mike Day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was something that was really disappointing towards the end of the session last year.
Yeah, I remember you joined us sometime around the end of the session to talk about the dangerousness bill and all of that. That's like you said, that's another topic for another time. Is there anything else with respect to the budget or the tax relief bill that you wanted to make the audience aware of? Yeah,
we have I talked about the renters and how we reduce taxes for renters, the senior circuit breaker. Right now that credit cannot exceed $750. Right, we raised that to $1,500, and we allowed for COLA which results in a tax break. The seniors, renters, low income folks, the earned income tax credit. Right now, those who qualify can only match up to 30%. We've raised that to 40% of the federal credit. So I think there's going to be a lot of talk about the Fair Share Amendment and how we kind of ate into those revenues. But at the same time, helping seniors, renters, and low-income folks is helping those folks is my top priority. So I was really proud that we were able to get that in the budget this year. And hopefully that's going to have a huge difference.
We're speaking with State Rep from New Bedford, Chris Hendricks. So, Chris, I did want to ask you about a bill that you came on to talk about last time and just, sort of seeing where that's at. I know it's still fairly early in the session. You guys got a 2-year session here, but you had a bill that was basically going to expand care for victims of violent crime, right? Some more preventative care, like basically, from my understanding. Well, explain what the law purports to do, and then just sort of tell us where that's at.
Well, the law would allow the state to bill Medicaid for violence prevention services. So when someone gets injured, typically, but we're talking about gun violence, they enter and they survive. They enter the emergency room. The hospital will be, or whatever medical provider will be able to bill Medicaid directly for violence prevention services in order to make sure that person is safe and doesn't, go out and not only get injured but also commit violence themselves in retaliation. So it's a big, robust, violence prevention is a big, robust effort. And ROCA, which is an anti-violence. I don't know if you're familiar with that agency, but it's ROCA is it's a nonprofit that aims to reduce gun violence in urban areas. They're prevalent in Boston and Baltimore and in other big urban centers. And so they've supported the bill. They've endorsed it. And basically, it's federal money that we're, in the Biden administration issued a directive saying that Medicaid is now going to be paying for these types of services, but we have to codify it first.
Yeah.
And this bill would essentially codify it and allow Massachusetts residents to receive that money through Medicaid.
And make it the third state in the country to do so, right? Illinois, Connecticut, and then Massachusetts?
Yeah, I think it's Illinois, Connecticut, and maybe Maryland now.
Okay.
There has been no research yet. They all did that within the last year or so, so we would be one of the first states to do it. Right now, that bill has been assigned to healthcare financing. It has yet to be issued a hearing date, but when it does, I'll certainly let you know.
Appreciate it, Chris. So we're speaking with State Rep Chris Hendricks. Chris, we've covered a lot. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch upon?
No, that's pretty much it. I'm anxious to see how the Senate handles the budget that we passed this week. Hopefully, all the good things that we just talked about remain, whether it be funding or substantive stuff. Because certainly, I know a lot of the priorities that a lot of the things we prioritized was prioritized by the governor. So I'm assuming once it clears, the Senate will be in good shape to get all these things through.
Absolutely. Chris Hendricks, State Rep from New Bedford. Appreciate the work you're doing up there, and look forward to you joining us again to keep us updated on what's going on up at the State House.
Of course. Thanks, Marcus.
That was State Rep Chris Hendricks, fellow UMass law grad. He is doing some good work there. He secured some major earmarks, right, for opioid addiction, expanding STEAM education, and helping helping UMass students tutor students in the greater New Bedford area to try to bring up the gap in literacy. So that's really important stuff. A lot of important work going on up there, and we appreciate State Rep Chris Hendricks for joining us and giving us an update on that. So 508-996-0500. That's how you can join us this evening. We're going to have Adam Bass, our reporter, Adam Bass, our City Hall guy. He's going to be joining us at 8 to give us an update of what's going on, what happened last night in the council chambers. He was there. We were able to bring you that information live. We were able to bring you that information live here because of the work that Adam Bass did. And so looking forward to talking with him at 8. Until then, I'll take your calls and I'll take your app chat messages. 508-996-0500. This is South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus Farrow. Welcome back to South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus Farrow. 508-996-0500. Happy Friday to everybody. So we got Adam Bass of Mass. He's going to be joining us at 8 o'clock. He was in City Council chambers. He'll be giving us live updates on that. That was State Rep Chris Hendricks. A lot of good information in here. A lot of good a lot of good information in that interview. The podcast will be up soon. If you missed any of it, it looks like they're doing a lot for residents in New Bedford with respect to expanding the tax credit for renters. A lot of good work for tenant protection, low income people who are in the lower income brackets. So that's, again, that podcast will be up, so I think it'll be good. A good re-listen if you want to catch some of that. Want to catch that again, because I think there was a lot to unpack there. One of the things I actually wanted to point out that I was particularly interested in is the jail calls amendment. So basically, in just a little background, I know we sort of gave you the cliff notes of it. Last year, there had been an ongoing lawsuit with Securus, which is the third-party program, the third-party vendor that charges for phone calls for inmates. Now, what's important to remember is the inmates don't get charged. It's the people on the other side of the phone. So, I mean, I'm like I said before, you guys know if you listen to the show, I'm a practicing attorney. I did criminal defense for some years, and you get charged every phone call. And the process is not only an incredible pain, but it can get pretty costly. And I mean, if you're an attorney, you get a budget for it. But if you're a family of somebody who's in the House of Correction, it might not be something within your affordability. And that's not good for the people on the other side of the phone, right? It's also not good for the inmates, because there's been study after study shown that having consistent contact with the outside world does reduce your likelihood of reoffending. That's been borne out in studies, over decades. So it is actually really important to reduce recidivism, as Chris Hendricks said, a term that you've heard quite a bit throughout the Bristol County Sheriff's race. And even when we're talking to now Sheriff Paul Heroux, we talked with former Sheriff Hodgson about it very extensively. Recidivism and trying to reduce it is a major part of I think, a successful corrections endeavor. So that jail calls amendment is really important. Then that was proposed after the lawsuit, because they basically said, right now the state law says that the sheriff's offices, and this was, I think, when the sheriff's offices were controlled by counties, but then they moved over to be controlled by the states in like 2009. The state law said that sheriff's offices can charge for phone calls, and they do. And a lot of times I think it's a matter of they might have to. I know I can't remember which other county sheriff's office, but I remember they talked to the sheriffs throughout the Commonwealth about this. One of them, I can't remember which one, had said, I think it was out in Central or Western Mass, but had said that they used the proceeds from the jail calls to fund some programming that they had, like busing family members, from certain areas to go, so they can go visit their loved ones that might be in the House of Correction. So this will, I think, be able to provide them with the resources they need to be able to provide those calls free of charge, which is not just good for the inmates. It's good for the people on the other side of the phone, the attorneys and the families of the individuals trying to, call out. So good stuff there. A lot of good stuff in that interview. So 508-996-0500. That's how you can join us this evening. We'll also take your messages on the WBSM app chat. I'll tell you what, I gotta take a break, and we'll be right back. This is South Coast Tonight.
1420 WBSM is now also on 99.5 FM. You've spent all day hearing about the news. Now's your chance to react to it.
Pick up your phone and call the professionals.
Call Chris and Marcus now at 508-996-0500. Or send a text via app chat on the WBSM app. Now, back to South Coast Tonight.
Hey, welcome back to South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus Farrow. 508-996-0500 is how you can join me. Happy Friday. Someone was asking what the tax deduction was on the for renters. It's been increased to $4,000. So that's good. That's based on the budget they passed. I So that's based on the budget that they passed. So that's what they're looking to increase it to, is $4,000. So 508-996-0500. That's how you can join me this evening. We'll also take your messages on the WBSM app. If you have the WBSM app, or you just like to go on WBSM.com, whichever works. I like the app personally. I think it's the easiest way to get everything that you need from WBSM in one, in one shot. You can listen to the broadcast. You can listen to South Coast Tonight. You can get the podcasts. So in a few minutes when the hour ends, I can upload the podcast to State Rep Chris Hendricks, and it'll appear on the WBSM app under podcasts. And you can go find our stories. And Tim Weisberg just had a story that came out that's really important, saying that, the city of New Bedford, Mayor Mitchell's office finalized a contract with the ASME union. So go check that out. That was a big discussion that was going on. Especially during when, Linda Moore had to put forward those $50,000 pay raises that were debated and then reduced in the city council. One of the concerns was how this was going to affect collective bargaining with the ASME union, the unionized employees in the New Bedford City Department. So 508-996-0500. Good evening.
Good evening, Marcus.
How's it going?
It's all right. Doing all right.
Cool.
This whole thing with rent stabilization, rent control, whichever way you want to call it. The other thing is Linda Morad a couple of weeks ago was on with Tim, and she said your water and your sewer is going to be going up. That you can see double on your payment. And on one end she wants to control the rents. On the other end, she's going to wham it. She's going to sock it to you with high sewer and high water rates. Well, you know what I'm saying? You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, and I think that was due in part. Jack Spillane explained that pretty well, right? It was due in part to the council's failure, frankly, to or refusal to pursue grant funding to update the sewer system.
Yeah, you still have ARPA money, millions, tens of millions of ARPA, which is the federal, the state, and the county that we have. $2 million have been appropriated for rent assistance, $6 million for the Zeitarian. And then a woman called and talked to the mayor on Tim's show last Wednesday and asked what's up with the roads. Why? What are you going to do about these roads that are crumbling? And he said, well, there's not much we can do. We're not getting as much state funding as we used to.
Yeah.
We only have $3 million in the road repair fund.
Yeah,
only
so
$3 million.
Yeah, I know a lot of that's Chapter 90 funding. It's difficult because I was on the, based on the amount of funding you get from the city and from the state, you can only do a certain amount of roads per year. Like in Fairhaven, I sat on the Board of Public Works, and we basically had to pick like 5 streets per year that we would pave, right? That the town would be able to pave. That was what was in the budget. So we picked 5 streets. It was usually based on, what the highest priority was, and you just do them, 5 at a time or a few at a time until you're able to get all those streets done. I don't know how many in New Bedford they can do per year, but they're very limited.
Well, in New Bedford, all they're doing is there's still a lot of potholes. They cover the potholes in some of the streets, and they're filling in the cracks. Yeah. But you just spend $8 million between rent assistance and $6 million, between the $2 million and the $6 million, $8 million, and then you're scrounging for money for road repair. Just to me, it makes no sense whatsoever. In Cambridge, I don't know if I told you, but the city of Cambridge receives the most state local aid from the state local aid than any other city in the Commonwealth. And there, if you own your home and you reside in that same home, you get a tax break. So why can't we have it here in the city of New Bedford to get more homeowners, rather than you have these big real estate firms come in and gobble up?
You get a tax break for what?
To get a tax break if you live and own a tenement home, you get a tax break up in Cambridge.
Hi.
And plus, they get a lot of money from the state. Why is it New Bedford? We're always scrounging for money, always trying to find money here and there, and Cambridge is getting all the money.
Yeah, that's true. Cambridge also has a much broader tax base than New Bedford does, right? Than most cities and towns do in the Commonwealth.
Well, that's why Liz Warren lives there. She gets tax breaks. Oh, she's got a house in Cambridge.
She does have a house in Cambridge. Yeah, that's where she lives.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
So
Maura Healy lives in Cambridge, too.
Maura Healy lives in Cambridge, too?
Yeah, she moved recently.
Oh, she moved. Where did she live before?
She lived in Boston before, but she moved to Cambridge.
In Boston proper?
Yeah, Boston proper.
Oh, all right. Yeah, but that's the thing. Do you know how much money we have in ARPA money from the Fed and the state and the county? I need a breakdown on that.
Yeah, $65 million New Bedford has, and then the county commissioners got some too. But hey, listen, I'm up against this break.
All right,
I gotta go.
It's good talking to you, Marcus. You have a good night.
You as well. Welcome back. Just closing out the 7 o'clock hour. We're going to have Adam Bass joining us in the 8:05 hour right after the news.